All right, guys. So we got our second interview because the first one was so fun. Coach Marino. Coach Marino's been was coaching with Greeley Wrestling for about 8 years. He was my phys ed teacher. I student taught with him. We went to the same college. The man overall, always been supportive of us in the program. And the one question I wanted to start with, I was thinking about before we even started, is how did Coach DeBellis or you decide to even start coaching wrestling at Greeley?
Uh, what happened with me was when you were wrestling, I used to work the clock a lot and the scoreboard, and I've always liked wrestling. And I remember there being just a lot of turnover in coaches or assistant coaches. And when Mike took over the program, he had asked me if I wanted to, to help out, because from what I remember, we always talked wrestling and stuff and sports in general, and that's how it came to be. So I helped out. I believe Coach Peterson was also there that year when I first started, and I was working mainly with the modified kids and having a blast. And those kids were Scott Wims, Brent Lobian, Billy Marino, the 8th grade class that was there. Some pretty talented wrestlers. What's that?
Sammy Tugendhaft.
Sammy, yep.
He ended up being tough. He got
Rob Child too wrestled for you.
Yep.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next too, and I'm thinking about it as Coach was listing those names. Coach Marino was kind of involved with the program in the modified level with a lot of talented guys, and our first wave as coaches of really guys that achieved a lot was guys that came straight from modified from Coach Marino. Do you remember back then, like if they really loved wrestling back then, or they were more doing it for a hobby, or like could you sense that they were going to be where they were going to be as they were coming through?
You could definitely see it. Again, they were talented. I remember watching Scott as a young kid, and I mean, he had the potential to be a state champion, and he did well for himself. And I remember, how it works in modified, where you pair up with the other coaches, and you tell them if he's passive or aggressive, what kind of experience they have when you're trying to match up kids, because it's not always strictly by weight class. And I remember, one of the coaches saying to me, well, I have a kid that's really good. And I was like, you might, but this kid's really, really good. And I think Scott went out there and like destroyed this kid. And, the coach was like, yeah, you were right, because he was so confident. I don't remember what school it was. I just remember seeing him and his ability. And, like Billy Marino too, big, strong kid. Brent, Sammy was a tough guy. He was new to it, but he was, they were fun to be around, those kids.
Yeah, that was a good crew.
Yeah.
They were good. And it almost like goes against the misconception, I feel like sometimes that happens in Chappaqua, where, and I don't think this is right, but other schools and maybe other wrestlers and football players and whatever like to think that, oh, it's Chappaqua, they're not going to be, that tough, that physical, that strong. And we have those kids, right? It's getting them to, commit to something like this and see it through. But Scotty was that kid, Billy Marino was that kid. These guys are athletes. These guys are strong. These guys are ready to go. It's almost like sometimes it's like we're that hidden gem. They don't really know about it in a sense, or they're not willing to put that work in. I mean, what do you guys think about that? I don't know.
Well, I think Brent Lobian, Billy Marino, those guys were football guys. And they were doing, I know Billy Marino's dad made him play 3 sports, and Billy Marino's dad and Billy, they were in a youth program, but we picked up Brent, I think through Billy, and he was a really big time swimmer. And he was teetering back and forth, and he ended up making it to the semifinals of sectionals. So did Billy.
And could have won that match too. He was right there.
Yeah.
That kid was balling.
I remember. I mean, Brent was unbelievable. The speed for a heavyweight. If that kid had another year, who knows what would happen?
He had a shot. He wasn't just a hugger.
No, he had a great. If I remember correctly, it was a great sweep single.
Yep. Yeah.
If he would have kept hitting that kid, what was it, Mana or something from Tappan Z?
Tappan Z.
Yep, Tappan Z. It was at pace. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yep.
So,
yeah, because we had such a great first day. Remember, we were in like first place after day 1 or something.
Third.
We were pumped, and then we did well. We ended up coming in like 5th or 6th. Whatever,
Kirby won his quarterfinal match to make it to the 7th.
Scott Rodriguez.
Yep.
I hope anyone listens to this one too.
Oh yeah.
That was a
I
freshman
mean,
though.
getting back to your question, that's one of the toughest things I think about wrestling or coaching any sport. The fact that you know or might not know, and you want the kids who are the best in your school to be out there. And there's so many kids who are, I think, afraid of the sport. They don't understand it. And so they're so afraid to get out there and try that, you know what? You could have the best kid in the whole school that's never wrestled. He's walking in the hallway. He never came into the room. And if they are going to get out there, Mike is going to get them out there. I think there's not a kid in the school that he hasn't asked to wrestle. If they have family members who are coming up, getting them to wrestle. I mean, he's a great, you know, motivator, and he's a great recruiter for the sport, and just the way he is. But, you know, I've always thought the same, whatever other sport I've coached, like, what if I don't have the best kids out here in the school? What if they're not playing? And you want to see that, you know, they should represent the school and their town and themselves.
Well, but the beauty about wrestling, I believe, is that's true, and that's why I brought up that point. Like, I feel like sometimes I wish we had some of these guys that could do so well. But the
Right.
beauty of the sport is, you look at somebody like Isabella, for example, who just worked her tail off. She worked so hard, and she, you know, a girl wrestling predominantly boys, and she got really good, right? So I think wrestling's that sport where, you know, she had 30 wins this year, varsity, right? Like, so I feel like this is the sport. If you have that right type of mindset, where you're willing to do what other people aren't willing to do, you know, you could achieve pretty much anything, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably similar in a lot of sports, but there's technical aspects, and, you know, it's just something about wrestling that I feel like if you're willing to put the work in, you could get the results.
Certainly.
So
Yeah.
This is a fact because some of the athletes that we get, you know, they develop so quickly in perspective of 4 years, because we get them as freshmen, junior year, they're competing for all section. You know, senior year, they're competing for section titles.
You've had some success getting kids who've come out their sophomore year and, you know, haven't wrestled for a long time. You know, there's been some kids maybe not getting to the sectional level, but I've had a pretty nice high school career for kids who just started fresh in 10th grade or so.
Yeah.
And that's tough.
Oliver Alt.
Section 1 jump.
The crazy thing about our team this year was that we had one youth wrestler on our starting staff, on our starting lineup, Vinny Sasso.
Yep.
There was nobody else that wrestled before freshman year, which is crazy.
And we had 8 qualifiers still. And Oliver Alt went from 0 wins as his first year wrestler as a sophomore to 20 as a junior, which is
Well, I'll tell you what, just watching him in class, just watching Oliver in class, I didn't have him, but we had a class where we were on at the same time. He would shadow wrestle in the weight room in between his sets for rest. He was dedicated, and you know, he had a nice little year for himself as far as from where he started. It was great to see that.
he wants
He's
it.
one of the kids.
He wants it. Talking to him now, he asks me questions about how does he feels like he's not catching the best guys in the section right now because of the quarantine. What could he do? You know, he wants to figure it out. And I think with that mindset, it's either you're going to figure it out, and if you don't, you're going to learn along the way anyway. So, I mean, it's, you know, let's go after it, you know, and I like where he's at, and I think it's doing a lot of good for him. I wanted to bring up a funny, not funny, but a true story. I was thinking about this yesterday. We were at States. I think it was for Scotty, I believe. And we went out to dinner. And it was me, you, it was us 3, and I think Danny Hall, maybe it was somebody else. There's a 4th. And John Deagle came up to our table, and he and if the people that are actually listening to this, he's the owner of Empire Wrestling, and he was my club coach in high school, and, you know, a good guy, big wrestling guy, obviously. He came up to us, he's like, do you guys really get along this good? Do you guys really like each other as much as you guys like? And I remember laughing, like, yeah, of course we do. And I don't know, either of you two kind of could talk about the dynamic. I think, you know, there's a special dynamic within the Greeley wrestling family, even with the coaches. And it's a little hard to put into words maybe, but if you guys could kind of try to see, you know, I don't know, it's just something different.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start to go before Mike and leave him for last because, you know, he's the man. I remember that night. That was at that nice steakhouse up in Albany. He came over to our table. We were there. and he said something to the effect of, you guys really have something nice. You guys really get along. And when he said that, I was like, yeah, and here I am. Doesn't everybody? And I've been around other coaches and other sports, and something special about Mike. Number one, a lot of people might not have hired a coach like you because it's intimidating, because your knowledge and the way you relate to the kids. And it gets back to the point that what I think was special about the core group of coaches that's always been there, there's no ego. Nobody cares who gets the credit. Mike is easily, going to a second mat in a tournament and leaving, to check everything out. And it's not like, oh, I have to be here for this wrestler because it looks best right now. There was never any of that. And to Mike's credit, a lot of coaches may have been intimidated and be like, no, I'm not going to have him because it's kind of taking power away from me, or kids won't listen. And it's never been like that. So that's, one of the best things I've seen. Again, there's no ego, and they're truly all friends. We're all friends.
One thing I always try to think of is, it's not really what you could do individually. It's what you can get done. So if you don't have the skills or the skill set to take these kids to the next level, well, then you have to figure out a way to get the right coaching staff, because each kid is going to be motivated differently. And Tutora has I remember coming to the first practice, I think a coach's second year or whatever it was, and we were up in Syracuse, and Lily got bit by a dog. So I was in the hospital all night, and I got to practice, and I drove from Syracuse straight through to practice at 9 a.m. It was Veterans Day, I think. And I said to the store, I said, look, can you run practice? And he's like, yeah. I never ran a practice after that day. He ran every practice after that day from then on. And it was the best thing that happened, because he is such a student of the game that he makes all the other athletes students of the game. We may spend a little bit of extra time on these certain techniques, but those are the techniques that are beating the guys at the top levels.
Yeah.
Anybody could teach a blast double and a half, and people are going to get away with that. If they're stronger and more athletic, they're going to win 30, 40% of their matches. But our guys aren't as strong, or whatever it is, they're beating good guys because of technique.
Yeah. Well, just to touch on, I appreciate that, Coach, but to touch on what Coach Marino was saying too, I think a big reason why all of us were so close was because of your lack of ego, right? Like, and everybody's lack of ego, really. But like, from the day I came on, there was never, I do it this way, don't do it that way, kind of thing, or we would talk. We never even really had disagreements, but if there ever was something that one of us did one thing one way or the other way, it was just between me and you, calmly to the side, never in front of a kid, never either way, right? Like, we would never do that. We would never throw each other under the bus or, show a lack of a united front in front of the kids. And I feel like, and there really was never one anyways that I could even think of, to be honest, but it's about the kids, right? It's about the kids. I love wrestling.
Yeah.
Right? You love wrestling, Coach Marino loves wrestling, but I feel like at the end of the day, it's like, how can we get the best out of these 20, 30 athletes that we have on the team? And I truly mean, the best as in the best person, right? Like, how can we make, like, whatever we're doing, right? We want to win. And I think some people will be like, oh, Tutor doesn't mean that. He's a competitor. He wants to win. Of course I want to win, right? But I will trade in winning for getting people to grow as much as Jacob Ferreira did by losing in the state finals, right? So that, I think the whole core together is great. But I wanted to actually bring up a point about how close we are and how much we care about the kids. Coach Marino still, to this day, I was just thinking about it while we were talking, still comes to my school every year for Christmas, and he's not one of the coaches anymore, but make sure he's there every year to be around those kids with special needs and giving back and just enjoying the moment with the Greeley wrestling family. And I think that's something special. You want to talk a little bit on that, Coach Marino, how you kind of come in and hang out with us? And
Well, I first of all, I think it's a really nice thing that you do. It's fantastic. The staff that you work with are so appreciative, and just seeing those kids' faces for that, 3 or 4 hours, however long we're there. The kids wrestle. They get so excited. There was a kid this year. You'll remember his name. He was so excited. He called out his teacher, and he was
Oh,
pointing to him. He was giving him the WWE. He was
David
giving him
Cole.
everything.
Man.
And just the sheer look of that kid, the joy on his face, and the whole room, our kids, our high school wrestlers, all the kids of that school and the staff, it's like they just won the Mega Millions. That's what it looked like. Like they were so excited, and just to see that in their faces, to present a kid with a gift, who knows what these kids have or don't have, and it's just a nice thing. They have a nice little meal that your staff puts together, and we get pizzas and whatnot. Our kids do a great job, and it's all because of you guys, and you work at that school.
But it's you guys too, right? And that goes
Yeah.
back to the same thing. Like I could have came up with this idea, and yes, it seems like a nice idea, but Coach DeBellis does not have to commit to that like he does. You don't have to commit to that every winter like you do. But again, we're all on the same page. It's all about benefiting the kids. And I was thinking about like these little interviews we're doing, and what are we really like getting out of these, right? One, I enjoy doing it. I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy talking to Matt. I'll enjoy talking to all the other guys that we talk to. But, it gives people a look at what's really going on in this program. It's a lot more than just wrestling. And we'll see that as we document it through the Bing Bings and the Scotties, back to the Jacobs, back to the Aarons, back to some parents that were interviewed. As far as I know, I mean, everybody's getting a good experience out of this, including us. I've grown as a coach by being a coach with Coach DeBellis. I've grown by being a coach with you. I've grown from all the kids that we've coached, right? They're all different, but they're different in great ways. And, it helps us together. I mean, it's definitely something special. And I hope people start to realize kind of what's going on there.
Yeah.
So I was thinking too, Coach Marino, could you tell could you see a difference maybe with the, and this is just me spitballing, I have no idea, with the team when I was in high school, because we were successful. Greg Burke and I were successful, compared to the different type of maybe success that we've had with me, you, and Coach DeBellis and the Greeley wrestling team. Is there like a difference there that you see maybe?
I wasn't really involved with it. I was kind of on the outsides, again, doing the clock, doing the scorer's table for the events. You guys were tough. You had 3 great wrestlers on that team and a couple of other complimentary ones that were pretty good. Grenier was tough. What's that? Yes, Spiegel.
He was a second kid.
Yeah. So really, I mean, there were some good wrestlers there, and there were some other tough kids. That was Coach Kaleo, and then later Coach Plotkin, and then to DeBellis. But the thing that's there is you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And it's not the sport to just, whatever. You got to go. And one thing that I've always said to the kids, you never know when you're going to break the other kid. You never know when they're about to quit. So when you see kids just give up on the mat and, give up that last second takedown, or they're holding on, they're riding tough on top, and all of a sudden the kid gets out with like 4 seconds left. You never knew one more, that kid had one more move on the bottom. He was bucking once, and then he was about to stop, and he got out, and then they give up the escape, and then maybe even a takedown after that. You never know. You hold on to that kid one more second, keep him down one more second, and they're about to quit. I would say there were kids from my observation when I used to watch, and again, I wasn't with them. I'm like, he's going to let this kid up. There's a minute left. He's up by 2. And I'm like, he's going to lose. Every time I've watched, this person has been in this pattern and they've lost the match. And I think it's more about maybe, and I wasn't in the room with you then, I think there's more of the mental approach to wrestling now, I would imagine, than there is back then. And not giving up and not quitting. And maybe that's the difference now to then. But again, that's just speculation on my part. I just know what we talked to the kids about, and I wasn't in there with you. So who knows? You could answer that better than I could.
Well, I'll bring up you guys in this. To me, just like it's different too, I guess, when you're an athlete compared to a coach, right? Like you're not planning the practices. You're not, as hands-on with that type of stuff as maybe you are now, but like ego plays into it. Wanting the kids to better themselves, no matter, if it's with us or elsewhere sometimes. But I had two coaches in college, and I always remember this when I'm doing practice. And I think you and Coach DeBellis were huge keys for this for me as well. Is you gotta get a kid motivated, you gotta get a kid excited, right? Some kids are very motivated on their own, but nobody's perfect. Myself, sometimes I gotta get myself up for a practice as a coach, right? It's never like the perfect ideal time. But out of my two coaches, I had Tom Ryan, I had this guy Tom Shiflett, who both were great people. But when Tom would come into practice, he had like this way to motivate you, right? He would tell a story, or he would say something motivational, or he would, he would relate to you, or he would make you feel like, look, I'm in this with you. This is why we're doing this. And you've been doing this since you're a little kid, and so on and so forth. While Tom Shiflett was a great coach technically, but he'd come into practice and say, all right, guys, up and jog. And I feel like that kind of was more of what was happening when I was in high school, where it was like, let's just get through practice. Now it's more of a, family, and we're brothers and sisters with Izzy, fighting for something bigger, and I think that kind of, with Coach DeBell's personality and mine, we both care a lot about the kids, but we're different. We're similar in a lot of ways, but we're different in a lot of ways also. And I think it's a good yin and yang. And when we had you there, and with, guys like Khalid and guys like Danny Hall and guys like Alex De La Cruz and whoever else we've had on the coaching staff, everybody brings something different, right? I remember when you were a coach, Coach Marino, and you could speak on this, you were great, I felt like, with the officials. I thought you were great with pulling everything back together. Like when we would have a talk at the end of practice, I would say something fired up. Coach DeBellis would be a little bit more mellow, and you bring it back. You tie it full circle, right? So I think it goes back to the idea of like having like a united front again, and I think that helps. Wins, losses don't really matter, but if we're all united, the kids are gonna benefit. I don't know. I think it'll be a good experience.
I think one of the greatest things that Coach brought to the table is he was black and white. It's like, either it was right or it was wrong, and he wouldn't sugarcoat anything. He wouldn't be rude, but he would say, look, this is what you need to do in order to be successful next time out. Whether they wanted to hear it or not, but for whatever reason, they received that message well from Coach, and the kids always talked about him and how, they loved his speeches and they loved how he related to life and all that stuff.
100%.
Well, I think it's, again, the different perspective. I didn't wrestle as far as you guys did. I stopped after my middle school year. I didn't wrestle in high school, but I always loved the sport. And it's a different perspective from coaching different sports. And it's not that we were saying different things. Coach DeTora may have been fired up in one way about something he saw in the match. Coach DeBellis might have been fired up about something he saw in a different way in the match. And I just brought it more into the term of maybe sports psychology and battling, and whether it relates to wrestling or not. It's funny, when I coach baseball, I would talk about wrestling a lot. And when I coach wrestling, I would talk about baseball a lot, how they're interrelated. Like wrestling is the ultimate one-on-one battle. It's you and the other person. And the only thing like that in sports, in baseball, is like you're batting, that's you, or you field the ball. That's the only one-on-ones that you get, or you're strictly the pitcher. So trying to relate that and balance it. And like you said, it's about life. It's not about the match there. You don't want to quit. You don't want to do that. And we've always talked about having the kids not regret anything when they left. You don't want them to come off the mat and all of a sudden they're like, if only I did this, leave it all out there. If you did your best, win or lose, you should be proud, but that's what it comes down to. And that's everything. You don't want to get home and be like, I should have done this. I could have done this. And I just didn't, so who knows? I mean, it's a mental game. It's so mental. And that's where I tried to come in.
Do you know what I was thinking about while you said baseball and wrestling? And I think I only have like 6 minutes or so left, but I'll get this one out here. And I have a couple other questions. I'm sure Coach has a couple other questions we could get out before the 6 minutes. But baseball and wrestling, and we don't really have to speak on it, but I see you when you were, with baseball guys talking about the guys that were in college and being in contact with them, and that keeps going for you, right? Like they know, they reach out to you still, you're following them and I feel like that's the same with us. And I think not that other sports don't do it, but it's definitely special with wrestling and baseball. Like I notice it, I see on coach's Twitter when he's following like guys that he used to coach, playing baseball. And, like I said, we still talk to guys that we first had, like Scotty, I was just talking to 20 minutes ago, and that was 8 years ago, so like I think that's special about both sports. And I think that again is about us, but I was just curious, and I know coach, I think has a question too, but just for fun, do you remember your most proud moment as a Horace Greeley coach, whether it was modified varsity, it doesn't matter. Can you remember one moment that stood out that you're like, this was awesome?
It could have been, to me, honestly, watching. I want to say there was a match where in middle school, there was a kid being like overly aggressive with like Sammy Tugendhaft. Okay. And Sammy came back and won that match. And it just, it could have even been in 9th grade. It was just something, because that kid came a long way and he was a pretty tough kid. He wasn't the frontline guy by any means, a great kid, he was, but watching those kids succeed in wrestling always meant something to me, because it's easy for those people like that to quit sometimes. 100%. And he stuck with it for all 4 years. And that was, things like that. But they're, our great wrestlers, watching a state champ, I watched from the stands a state champion in Aaron Walk, watched the other guys on the mat. That was special. But, just seeing the personal battles that each kid goes through and overcoming, a nemesis. I remember when John Russo beat the kid from Brewster. That was a match. Was that triple overtime? It was crazy.
I had class that night. I was in Manhattan at the time.
Yes,
I remember.
Just moments like that meant a lot to me. I would say any of those.
That says something about you too, that the first thought that came to your mind was a modified match, right? And again, it goes back to ego, right? It's about the kid. It's not about, we don't need the newspaper articles and the news. Though they're cool. It was great having Izzy on news film this year, right? It's fun, it's fun for them. Like I loved it when they said, what'd they call her? Isabella the Grappler or something, like what'd they call her? Something funny like that. Like I loved it. I was like pushing her, like the Grappler. Yeah, and I was like, push carry, you hear that, Garcia the Grappler? That's so cool. Like, but at the end of the day, it's cool for them. We don't need that. And to go on to Coach DeBellis, when he made us co-head coaches, what was that, 2 years ago? Yeah, like I told him straight up that I didn't need that, but he wanted that, right? And again, it's ego. It's like there's none, and I think that's super important for the kids, and hopefully they grow to be those type of people also, where they're not, caring only about themselves. They're looking at others and what's best for everybody. But Coach, do you have Coach DeBellis, any questions for Coach Marino? Because we got like 2 minutes and 30 seconds left.
I have one question for Coach Marino. Are you coming back next year?
Oh man.
First of all, listen, I don't know if you know this. Mike called me just before this meeting and said it would be a good idea if we all wore our singlets. And I was like, okay, maybe. But then I was like, when I turned this on, I'm like, no one's in their singlet. I'm like, thank God I didn't wear mine. Well, so, yeah. So again, he was putting me on. As far as next year, I don't know. It's really, who knows what's happening. We had a child care issue this year, so I couldn't coach anything. And, it's in there. I do love it. And the competition, like I personally need that, but I have to, family first.
True. Very true. We're going to lose. I think we're going to run out of time here, so I don't make sure we don't lose anything because it's saying less than a minute. But I think to tie everything together, and Coach, thanks for coming. You're the man. These are going to be really fun going forward.
Thank you.
But to have somebody like Coach Marino is what is the missing piece. Like a guy like Alex is unbelievable. He wants to be, a little higher level with varsity. A guy that like Coach Marino would help us bring the youth to where they need to be like guys like Scotty Wim and Kirby and, and hopefully it can be Coach Marino. If it can't, we find somebody with the same heart and passion as him, then maybe we'll be able to be as successful as we should be, So.
Well, there's one solution to the child care issue. Bring your kids, bring Andrew to Greeley so he can wrestle with Nikki.
We'll be real good.
We need him.
We need him.
I know he can do a half.
And we're going to move to Chappaqua. Luke is already wrestling a little bit. He got blue paint on me today when we were trying to paint. We were fighting a little bit, wrestling around, and so. But you're the man, Coach. I'm going to sign us off so we don't lose this, but I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. We'll see you guys later.
Stay healthy.
That's right. We better. Bye, guys.